Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week, and if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment down below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. Today I'll be teaching how to make a modern t-shirt. For this one we stuck to the basics with clean lines, a unique collar, and added the cutest baby sleeves. Peak modern aesthetic. Speaking of, if you've been on the lookout for some modern crochet designs for your next make, you are in the right place. We have hundreds of the most modern crochet tutorials and patterns you're sure to love with new patterns weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 150 grams of yarn, and that's 300 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 5mm hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us if you prefer Starbursts or Skittles. I prefer a Starburst. Details for the giveaway down below. We're using 4 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, half double crochet, and double crochet. This tutorial is made for a size small, and you can adjust it for your size, and we explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Next, we're all going to grab our 5mm hook and start off by making a chain the length that we'd like for this top to be. So starting at 1 inch underneath our underarm, I'm going to make a chain of 60, and that's 14 inches or 36 centimeters, and that is a full length top, but you can make yours shorter for a crop top as well. Now that we have our chain, we're all going to block off that last chain and do a chain 2. That chain 2 does not count as a stitch, that's our turning chain, and we're going to get started with our first half double crochet row. So yarn over, preparing for a half double crochet. We're going to insert our hook into that chain that we blocked off, or the third chain from our hook. So bring your hook down into that chain. Next we're going to yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 3. Let's do one more together. Yarn over into that following chain, insert your hook, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 3. Continue with 1 half double crochet into every chain, leaving the last one. So we've made our way down with our half double crochets and left the last one. Now we're going to do an increase of 2 half double crochets. So insert into that last chain with 1 half double, and then into that same last chain with a second half double crochet. Now that we have that, we're going to do a back loop slip stitch row. So let's all chain 1 and flip our work. Now for this portion of our underarm, we are not going to be doing any increases for our slip stitch row, so just find that last stitch from our previous row, insert into that back loop, yarn over, and gently pull through everything. Let's do that again. Into that next stitch's back loop, insert, gently pull through everything on our hook. And we're going to continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Now as a really quick tip, make sure that you're not tugging too tightly after every stitch, otherwise the following row could be a little too tight to work into. Our first 2 rows are finished. Now we're going to be alternating between a back loop half double and back loop slip stitch row. So our following row is going to be a back loop half double crochet row, so let's all chain 2 and flip our work. So just getting started on a row 3, we're all going to yarn over. We're going to find that first stitch from our previous row and insert in through that back loop, pull through all 3, and that's it. Continue on with 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last one. Now that we've made our way all the way down with our row 3, leaving that last stitch, we're now going to do an increase of 2 back loop half double crochets. So yarn over, into that last stitch's back loop with 1, and then into that same last stitch with a second back loop half double crochet, and that's it. From here we're going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows. So back loop slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases, and then a back loop half double crochet row that ends on an increase of 2 until we get a portion that can stretch, because it does have a decent amount of stretch to it, from mid underarm over to the corner of our underarm. And then I will meet you guys back right after a back loop slip stitch row. I am back and the first portion of my underarm is all finished. I have a total of 4 rows and my width is just about 1 inch or 2 centimeters unstretched. Now from here we're going to do a few more underarm rows just to get a really smooth curve that leads all the way up to the shoulder. So since we all should have ended along the bottom, we're going to chain 2, flip our work, and put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last stitch, because now we're going to be doing an increase of 3 half double crochets. So we've just finished up our half double crochet row and we have left the last stitch. And now do an increase of 3 back loop half double crochets into that last stitch. So there's 1, into that same last stitch with 2, and then into that same last stitch with now 3 back loop half double crochets. Now for this portion of our underarm, we are going to need to increase into our back loop slip stitch row as well. So what we're going to do is chain 1. That chain 1 is going to count as a stitch, and then make a second chain. That second chain counts as our turning chain, and we will flip our work. And now from here we are going to slip stitch into that second chain from our hook's back loop. So we're going to skip 1, into that second chain, insert into that back loop with a slip stitch, and then from here continue on with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Now from here we are going to continue to repeat these 2 previous rows. So a back loop half double crochet row that ends on an increase of 3, and then a back loop slip stitch row with an increase as well, until this can now stretch from mid underarm over to the front of our body. And when we have that, I will meet you back right after a back loop half double crochet row. We are back and I have just finished up the second half of my underarm portion, and now I have a total of 7 rows and my width is now 2 inches or 5 centimeters unstretched. Now from here we're all going to make a chain that is in multiples of 3 that reaches all the way up to the top of our shoulder. Now I have already measured mine out. I needed a total of 4.5 inches or 11 centimeters, so I made a chain of 18, and then we're going to continue on with our row sequence. So the following row in our row sequence is a back loop slip stitch row. So once we have our chain, we're all going to chain 1 and flip our work. So into the second chain from our hook, we're all going to insert, yarn over, and pull through everything on our hook. Let's do that again. Into that next chain, insert, yarn over, pull through everything, and continue with 1 slip stitch into every chain. Once we reach the body, 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Now this is the shoulder portion, and since we're working on the shoulder, we actually don't need to be doing any increases or decreases. So at the end of this row, chain 2, flip our work, put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, and then continue to repeat our back loop slip stitch and back loop half double crochet row until we get a shoulder portion that we like. So I would suggest about 1 inch until we reach the base of our neck. And then I'll meet you back right after a back loop slip stitch row. We are back and I have just finished up my shoulder portion. I have a total of 12 rows and my width is just about 2.5 inches or 6 centimeters unstretched. And now we're going to get started on our neckline. So first things first, we're all going to need to insert our stitch marker into any stitch that is in multiples of 3 from the top. So I just inserted my stitch markers right where my collarbone was, and that is into the 9th stitch from the top for me. Now from here, since we all should have ended along the bottom, we're going to be putting 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving 3 stitches right before our stitch marker. So we just made our way all the way back up with our first neckline row. We should have left 1, 2, 3 stitches right before our stitch marker. Now we're going to do a decrease of 3 back loop half double crochets. So yarn over. Insert your hook into that 3rd to last back loop, pull through, into that 2nd to last back loop, pull through, and into that last back loop, and pull through, for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook. From here, let's yarn over and pull through all 5 of those loops. And now our half double crochet row is finished. Now getting started on our back loop slip stitch row, that's going to have a decrease into it as well, so let's all chain 1 and flip our work. So getting started on our slip stitch row, it's going to start with a decrease. So insert your hook into that 1st stitch's back loop, pull through, into that 2nd stitch's back loop, then yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops. And that is our decrease of 2 back loop slip stitches. Now from here, put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Now from here, it's going to be a repeat of these 2 previous rows. So just to do the following 2 rows together again, at the end of this row, chain 2, flip our work, and put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 3. We are back and we have just finished our 1, 2, nearly 3rd neckline row. Our 3rd neckline row should have been a half double crochet row, and we should have left the last 1, 2, 3 stitches. So now we're going to do a decrease of 3 back loop half double crochets again. So into that third to last back loop, insert, pull through, second to last, pull through and into that last, pull through for a total of 5 loops on our hook, then yarn over, pull through all 5, and we're going to get started on our slip stitch row, which is going to start with a decrease, so chain 1 and flip. Now to do our decrease for our slip stitch row, insert your hook into that first stitch's back loop, pull through into that next stitch's back loop, then yarn over and pull through all 3, and that's it. We're going to continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and that's it. We're just going to continue to repeat these 2 previous rows until this portion can now stretch from mid underarm over to mid chest. And then I will meet you back right after a back loop half double crochet row. So we are back. I have just finished up the decrease portion of my neckline. I have a total of 21 rows, and that's just about 5 inches or 13 centimeters unstretched. And now we're going to get started on our middle row, which is just going to be a back loop slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases. And then we're going to mirror everything that we did here on the other side. So just to get started on our middle row together, we're all going to chain 1, since we all should have ended right after a half double crochet row, and flip our work. And from here, all we're going to do is find that first stitch from our previous row, insert into that back loop, yarn over, pull through everything, again into that next stitch's back loop, insert, pull through everything. Continue with 1 slip stitch into every stitch, and before we do too many stitches, we just want to make sure that we are inserting a stitch marker into the top of this middle row so we know where the middle is when we get started on the collar. Once we reach the end of this middle row, we're going to get started on the increase portion of our neckline. So we're all going to chain 2, flip our work, and put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last stitch. So now we can do an increase of 3 back loop half double crochets instead of a decrease. Alright, so we are back. We have just finished up our middle row, and now we're going to get started on the other side of our neckline. So like I said, it is going to be mirroring this side of our neckline over here. So since we did a decrease of 3 back loop half doubles, we're now going to be doing an increase of 3 back loop half doubles. So we should have all made our way all the way up with our back loop half double crochet row, leaving just 1 stitch left. Now we're going to do our increase. So yarn over, insert your hook into that last stitch's back loop with 1 half double, into that same stitch's back loop with a second, and into that same stitch's back loop with a third back loop half double crochet. Now from here, all we're going to do is increase into our back loop slip stitch rows as well. And the increases for this portion is going to be the same as the second half of our underarm portion that we did. So to increase into our back loop slip stitch row, we're all going to chain 2. That first chain is going to count as a stitch. That second chain is going to count as a chain, and flip your work. And now we're going to be slip stitching, starting with that second chain from our hook. So we're going to skip that first one, into that second chain, insert, yarn over, pull through everything, and again, put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. And from here, we're going to continue to repeat these 2 rows until we have the same amount of rows as the decrease portion of our neckline. So once we have the same amount of rows as this portion of our neckline, not counting that 1 middle row, I will meet you back so we can work straight into our shoulder from there. I am back, and I've just finished up the increase portion of my neckline. Now I have the same amount of rows as my decrease portion over here. We all should have ended right after a back loop half double crochet row. And just to let you guys know, I have a total of 31 rows, and my width is just about 7 inches or 18 centimeters. Now from here, since we all should have ended right after a back loop half double crochet row, we're all going to start our shoulder portion by making a chain for the same amount of stitches that we skipped when we got started on our neckline. So for those of you that have my numbers, I skipped a total of 9 stitches. So over here, I made a chain 9. Then all we're going to do from here is the same shoulder portion that we did over here. So we're going to continue to do our back loop slip stitch and back loop half double crochet rows for the same amount of rows that we have on this side. Once we do, we should all end right after back loop slip stitch row, so along the bottom, and then I will meet you guys back so we can get started on the first portion of our underarm. I am back, and my shoulder portion is all finished. I have a total of 8 inches or 22 centimeters, and now we're going to get started on our first portion of our underarm. So first things first, we're all going to need to insert our stitch marker into the same amount of chains that we made that led all the way up to the top of our shoulder. So for those of you that have my numbers, I made a chain 18. So over here, I counted down 18 stitches and inserted my stitch marker into the 18th stitch. Now from here, since we all should have ended along the bottom, we're going to be putting one back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 3 stitches right before our stitch marker. So what we're going to do from here is yarn over and do a decrease of 3 back loop half double crochets, because on the other side we did an increase of 3. So we're going to insert our hook into that following stitch's back loop, pull through, second stitch's back loop, pull through, and then into that last stitch's back loop, pull through for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops, then yarn over, pull through all 5. And since for the other side for our underarm we did increase into our slip stitch row, we're going to need to do a decrease into this slip stitch row as well, so let's all chain 1 and flip our work. Our decrease is going to be the same decrease that we did for the neckline, so as a refresher we're going to insert our hook into that first stitch's back loop, pull through into that next stitch's back loop, then yarn over and pull through everything, and continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Now from here we're going to be continuing these 2 previous rows. So a back loop half double crochet row that ends on a decrease of 3, and then a back loop slip stitch row that has a decrease as well, and we're going to continue to repeat these 2 rows until we have the same amount of the second half of our underarm portion that we started off with. Once we have the amount of rows that we need, I will meet you back, and as a quick tip, we should all end right after back loop half double crochet row. So we are back, and we have just finished up the first portion of our underarm, and we're about to finish up the entire front panel with the second portion of our underarm. So just as a really quick refresher, I have a total of 39 rows, and my width is now 8.5 inches or 22 centimeters unstretched. Now from here, we are going to do a back loop slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases, making our way all the way down. Then to do our following back loop half double crochet row, we're going to chain 2, flip our work, and put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 2, and then I'll show you how to do that decrease. So I have just finished up a back loop slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases, and then also made my way back up with a back loop half double crochet row, and we left the last 2 stitches. So now we're going to be doing a decrease of 2, because on the other side we did an increase of 2. So let's all start with the yarn over and insert our hook into that second to last back loop. Then we're going to yarn over, pull through that first loop, and then into that last stitch into our previous row, making sure we're inserting into that back loop, yarn over, pull through for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4 loops on our hook, then yarn over and pull through all 4 of those loops. And from here we're going to continue to repeat these 2 previous rows, so a back loop slip stitch row, and then a back loop half double crochet row that ends on a decrease of 2, until we have the same amount of rows as the first portion of our underarm. Once we do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I will meet you back. Alright, so I am back and my front panel is all finished. I have a total of 43 rows. My width is just about 9.5 inches or 27 centimeters unstretched, and I did do a chain up of 1 and cut because I ended up having the same amount of rows as my first underarm portion. Now once we have the front panel all finished up, we are going to get started on the back panel, but the back panel is going to be done pretty much the same way as the front panel, minus all of the increases and decreases for our neckline. We're just going to have a straight across portion. I actually already have my back panel already finished up, so I'm just going to talk you guys through it. So getting started on our back panel, we're all going to start by making the same amount of chains that we made when we got started with our front panel, and we're going to be doing the same total underarm portion as the front panel. Then make the same chain that led all the way up to the top of our shoulders for the same amount of shoulder rows. Then from there, we're going to start our neckline for the back portion by inserting our stitch marker into the same amount of stitches that we inserted into for the front panel, but instead of doing the decreases and increases, just work straight across, putting 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, and the following row is going to be 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, working our way across our back for the same amount of rows that we have for the neckline for the front panel. Once we have that, we're going to repeat the shoulder and underarm of the front panel, and when we have that, we are all done. So do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I will meet you back to seam everything together. So now that both of our front and back panels are all finished up, we're now going to seam the sides. So this side seam is going to be an outside loop slip stitch seam, making it look like another back loop slip stitch row. So let's all make sure that the ribbing that we have is faced up towards us, and the back panel's ribbing is faced away from us, so it's basically faced right side out. Then we are going to be inserting our hook into the bottom corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Insert your yarn onto your hook, pull through, and do a chain up of 1 to secure. Now let's do our seam. We're all going to start by finding that first stitch into the front panel, insert into that front loop, find that next stitch into the back panel, insert into that back loop, then yarn over and pull through everything on our hook. Let's do this again. Into that next stitch into the front panel, insert into that front loop only. Into that next stitch into the back panel, insert into that back loop only. Then yarn over, pull through all three, and just once more into that next stitch into the front panel, insert into that front loop. Next stitch into the back panel, insert into that back loop, then yarn over and pull through all three. And that's it. We're going to continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of one and cut, and then repeat on the other side. So my sides are all seamed up, and the next thing we're going to do is seam our shoulders. So what we're going to do is make sure that our work is flipped wrong side out now, meaning the seam that we did for the sides is now along the inside, and the ribbing is along the inside, because this single crochet seam for the shoulder is going to be on the inside. Then we're going to be inserting our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. We're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and do a chain up of one to secure. And what we're going to do is put one single crochet into every side slip stitch row, and then two single crochet into every side half double crochet row. So to do the first one, everyone should have a side slip stitch row, so insert into that top loop within the front panel. Find that top loop within the back panel into the top of that side slip stitch row. And if you're like me, you don't want to weave in your tail ends later, place that tail end over your hook and single crochet around everything. Let's do that again. Our following side row is a side half double crochet row. So we're all going to start by finding our top loop within that next row within the front panel. Find that next top loop within the back panel, into that top loop right there, with one single crochet, and since this is our side half double crochet row, we're going to be doing another single crochet into the top loops. So in through the front panel, and in through the back panel. It should be a little bit easier, since all of our stitches should be gathered, and single crochet. And that's it. We're going to continue doing that until we don't have any more side rows left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of one and cut, and then repeat on the other side. So we are back. We have seamed everything together now, and now we're going to get started on our collar. So we're all going to make sure that our work is now flipped right side out, meaning the seams that we just did for the shoulder is now along the inside. Then we're going to take a look at the back and insert our hook into any one of the side rows that we have along the back panel. Insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, do a chain up of one to secure, and now we're going to do a single crochet row, putting one single crochet into every side slip stitch row, two single crochet into every side half double crochet row, and then one single crochet into every stitch. So let's just do the first few side rows. My first side row here is a side half double crochet row, so I'm going to find that top loop and insert my hook with two single crochets. So there's one, and then into that same top loop with two single crochets. This is my following side row, a side slip stitch row, so find that top loop and insert with one single crochet. That's basically it. We're going to continue doing this, making our way all the way around. Remembering that once we reach the middle row within the front panel, so that middle row with our stitch marker into it, that is going to be a side slip stitch row, so just one single crochet goes into there. We're going to be inserting our stitch marker into the top of that stitch because we do need to know where the middle stitch will be. When we make our way all the way around, slip stitch into that chain space and do a chain up of one and cut. So we are back and our single crochet row is all finished. Now the next thing we're going to do is the height of our collar. So first things first, we're all going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up. Then we're all going to be inserting our hook into the second stitch away from our middle stitch marker stitch within the front panel, working towards the right. And we want to make sure that we are inserting it in through that front loop only. And this is going to be the same for every size. Then from here, we're going to insert our yarn onto our hook. And from here, we're going to be putting one front loop double crochet into every stitch. So to do a double crochet, we're all going to yarn over, and our first double crochet for every size is always going to be worked into that middle stitch marker stitch. So yarn over and insert our hook only in through that front loop, pull through. We're going to pull through two, pull through two. Let's just do one more. Yarn over, into that next stitch's front loop, insert, pull through two, pull through two. And we're going to continue with one front loop double crochet until we get the total width that we'd like for our collar to be, making sure that our stitches are in multiples of 3. I'd like mine to be longer and for it to sit on my neck, so I'm going to make my collar 3.5 inches or 9 centimeters, and that's 15 back loop double crochets. I'm back with my first row. Now let's get started on a row 2, so chain 1 and flip. And if this portion of our collar looks shorter than the finished product, don't mind that, we had just a little bit of testing to do. And from here, continue with one back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So we now put one back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and now we're going to connect it into the base, and the base is on the other side of our stitch marker. So finding that next stitch into the base, we're going to insert our hook into that back loop only. So insert, yarn over, and pull through everything on our hook to connect our slip stitch row. Then to work our way up to our falling back loop double crochet row, we're going to be slip stitching up the next 2 available stitches into the base into those back loops again. So we're going to slip stitch up 1, slip stitch up 2, making sure that they're all within the back loops, and we do need to do it within the back loop so that we have something to work into once we make our way all the way around, and then flip our work. None of the slip stitches count as a stitch. Now from here, yarn over, find that last stitch from our previous row, which is none of those slip stitches, insert into that back loop with a double crochet, and that's basically it. We're going to continue with 1 back loop double crochet into every stitch. At the end of the row, chain 1, flip our work, put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and then connect it into the base the same way that we just did, making sure that it's all within the back loops. And we're going to continue this, making our way all the way around our neckline until we reach the edge of this first row that we did right over here for our collar. And then I'll meet you back just to show you how we're going to be working into the back loops. Alright, so we are back and we have made our way all the way around with our rows. We have worked into that stitch right before that first row that we did. All we're going to do is continue on with our rows that we have, but working into the available stitches that we have along the inside. So I'm just going to flick my work over so you can see it. Now since we inserted our first row into our front loops, we should have these available stitches left. We're going to continue on. Everything is going to be completely the same, connecting it into the base the same way, making our way all the way down until we reach our stitch marker, and then I will meet you back so we can seam it together on the other side. Alright, so I have made my way all the way around with my collar. I don't have any more stitches left to work into, so I've made my way all the way over to my stitch marker, and now we're going to seam everything together. Now this is going to be a single crochet seam, so I have already flipped my work wrong side out. And the seam can be done 2 ways depending on if you guys ended at the base like me or if you're along the outer edge. If you're along the outer edge, that's completely fine as well. You're just going to be starting your seam a little bit differently. So if you are along the outer edge, what you are going to do is count from our stitch marker stitch out the same amount of stitches that we have for our collar. So as an example, if I did end along the outside, since I had a total of 15 stitches, I would have inserted my hook into the 15th stitch, into these back loops that we left for ourselves, and then we're going to do our single crochet seam. So the same seam that we did for the shoulders. For those of us that are along the edge, we're just going to insert our hook into that first available stitch and then do our single crochet seam. So all I'm going to do is insert my hook in through both of my stitches within the available stitches that we left for ourselves and within the first stitch that I have into my collar and single crochet. Let's do this again. Into the next available back loop that we left for ourselves, and then into that next stitch that we have into our collar and single crochet. And that's it. We're going to continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into, and when we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut. Alright, so we're back and we have just finished up the entirety of our collar, seamed up and everything, and now we're going to get started on our sleeve. So first things first, we're going to make sure the work is flipped right side out. We're going to insert our hook into the last stitch that we have into our side seam, and then we're going to start with a single crochet row. So let's all start by inserting our yarn onto our hook. We're going to pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure, and all we're going to do is put 2 single crochets into every side half double, and 1 single crochet into every side slip stitch row, and then 1 single crochet into every stitch. So just getting the first few side rows started, our first side row should be a side half double crochet row for everyone. So find that top loop and insert your hook, and you should have a decent amount of tail ends, so go ahead and place that over your hook if you do not wish to weave them in later, and single crochet over everything. Now since we are putting 2 single crochets into every side half double, 1 more single crochet into the same side half double. So into that top loop, insert with another single crochet, and then into our following side row, which is a side slip stitch row, insert your hook in through that top loop with just 1 single crochet, and that's it. We're going to continue on with our single crochet row, making our way all the way up. Once we reach our last stitch right before our shoulder seam, I will meet you guys back just to show you what we're going to do there and work our way back down. So we have made our way all the way up to our shoulder seam. Now just to make sure that everyone is on the right track, the amount of stitches that we should have should be in multiples of 3, since these are in multiples of 3, and then so is the chain that we made that led up to our shoulder. What we're going to do is now chain 1, and then insert a stitch marker into that chain 1 so we know where our middle stitch is. And then from here, skip over to that following stitch that we have on the other side of our shoulder seam, and then continue on with our row. So 1 single crochet into every stitch. Once we reach the side rows, 2 single crochet into every side half double, 1 single crochet into every slip, and then slip stitch into that chain space when we make our way all the way around. So now that our single crochet row is all finished up, we're now going to get started on the length of our sleeve. So we're all going to start by making a chain the length that we'd like for the bottom of our sleeve to be, keeping in mind that it will get longer the higher up that we get. I would like for mine to be just about 3 inches or 8 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain of 15. So now that we have our chain, we're going to do a half double crochet row. So block off that last chain and do a chain 2. That chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. We're going to yarn over, preparing for a half double crochet. And then we're going to insert our hook into that chain that we blocked off, or the third chain from our hook, with 1 half double. And continue with 1 half double into every chain, leaving the last one because we are going to increase together. So we've put 1 half double crochet into every chain, leaving the last one. Now into that last chain, we're going to do an increase of 2 half doubles. So yarn over, into that last chain, insert with 2 half double crochets. So there's 1, and into that same last chain with a second. And now we're going to connect it into the base. But we are going to need to make sure that we're working clockwise or to the left because the ribbing that we're about to do is not reversible. So what we're going to do is count up 1, 2 stitches. Into that second stitch, go ahead and insert with a slip stitch. And that slip stitch does not count as a stitch, that's just to connect our row. Getting started on our following row is going to be a slip stitch row. So slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, that still doesn't count as a stitch, and flip our work. And for the sleeve, we are not going to be doing any increases or decreases for our slip stitch rows. So just find that first available stitch's back loop, insert with a slip stitch, and continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Now at the end of this row, we are going to chain 2, flip our work, and put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last one so that we can increase together just once more. So we are back and we have 1, 2, 3 rows nearly finished. Now we should have left 1 stitch at the end of our row 3, and we're now going to do an increase of 2 back loop half double crochets into that last back loop. So go ahead and insert your hook with 1 half double, and then into that same back loop, a second half double crochet. And now to connect it into the base, we're going to count up 1 available stitch, 2 available stitch, and slip stitch into that second stitch into the base. That slip stitch still doesn't count as a stitch, and just to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next available stitch into the base, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Now from here, we are going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we all have the same amount of rows as underarms that we have. Now the amount of rows may be different for everyone, but just to count out my underarm rows with you guys, I have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 underarm rows. So since I have 1, 2, 3, I will be doing 4 more rows to get a total of 7, and then I will meet you back. And we should all end back right after a back loop half double crochet row, and then I'll meet you back so we can work our way up the shoulder for our shoulder increases. We're back and we have just finished up the underarm increase for our sleeve. Now like I said, we should have the same amount of rows as underarm rows that we had. So like I said in the previous clip, I had a total of 7 underarm rows for the body. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 underarm sleeve rows. So from here, we're going to be doing basically the same thing, but instead of an increase of 2 at the end of every back loop half double crochet row, it's going to be an increase of 3 because we're working our way up our shoulder and gives us a little bit more length. So since we all should have ended right after back loop half double crochet row, we're going to work our way into the base the same way that we normally would and do our back loop slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases. At the end of that row, chain 2, flip our work, and put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last one just so we can do that increase together once more. So we are back. We have just finished up our first back loop slip stitch row and did our back loop half double crochets all the way down. And into that last stitch that we left available, we're going to do an increase of 3 back loop half double crochets. So just 3 back loop half double crochets into that last stitch. And now that that increase is finished, we are going to connect it into the base the same way that we normally would, and now continue to repeat these 2 rows. Now we're going to continue this, making our way all the way up until we reach our stitch marker stitch along the top. The last row that we should have been worked is a back loop half double crochet row worked into the stitch right before we reach our stitch marker. And just as one more really quick tip, we do want to keep track of how many rows we have from this first back loop slip stitch row that we have right here that we just did together, getting started on the height of our shoulder, making our way all the way up to our stitch marker stitch. But keeping that number in mind, I will meet you guys back so that we can do our middle sleeve row together. We are back, and I have just finished up the increase portion for our sleeve going up our shoulder. Now from here, we should all be worked into the stitch right before our middle stitch, which is our stitch marker stitch. It should have all ended right after back loop half double crochet row. So what we're going to do from here is slip stitch into that following stitch, which is that stitch marker stitch, and then do a back loop half double crochet row with no increases and no decreases. This is going to be our middle row. At the end of that row, we're going to get started on the other side of our sleeve, which is going to mirror basically the same thing that we did here, but instead of increases, we're going to be doing decreases. So at the end of that middle row, chain 2, flip our work, and put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 3 stitches, and then we can do a decrease of 3 together. Our middle row is finished. Our back loop half double crochet row is nearly finished. We should have left the last 3 stitches, and now we're going to do our decrease of 3 back loop half doubles. So we should all know how to do that. We're all going to yarn over, insert our hook into that third to last back loop, pull through into that second to last back loop, pull through, and then into that last stitch's back loop, and pull through for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops. Then yarn over, pull through all 5. And we're now going to connect it into the base the same way that we've been doing. So we're just going to count up the next 2 available stitches. There's 1, there's 2. Slip stitch into that second stitch into the base, slip stitch into that next available stitch to work our way up to the following row, and then do our back loop slip stitch row. Now from here, we're going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows. So a back loop half double crochet row that ends on a decrease of 3, and then a back loop slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases for the same amount of rows that we had on this side of our sleeve, for the same amount of rows where we only did an increase of 3 into the back loop half double crochet rows. We should all end right after back loop slip stitch row, and then I will meet you guys back just to show you how we're going to close off our sleeve. And then I will meet you back just to show you how we're going to finish off our sleeve. We are back, and we have just made our way all the way down with the portion of our sleeve where we did a decrease of 3 at the ends of every half double crochet row. Now we're going to close off the row by doing back loop half double crochet rows that end on a decrease of 2. Now we all should have ended right after back loop slip stitch row, so what we're going to do is chain 2, flip our work, and put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 2 so we can decrease together. We've left the last 2 stitches, and what we're going to do is yarn over, insert your hook into that second to last back loop, pull through, and then into that last stitch's back loop, and pull through for a total of 4 loops on our hook. So just yarn over, pull through all 4, and now connect it into the base. So count up 1, count up 2, slip stitch into that second stitch, and then from here we're going to continue to repeat this row and a back loop slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. We are back. We have just finished up the entirety of our sleeve, and now we're just going to seam it together. This is going to be an outside loop slip stitch seam, so the same seam that we did for the sides. So let's just double check and make sure that our work is flipped right side out. Then all we're going to do is insert our hook into that first available stitch into the front panel and insert only into that front loop. Then insert your hook into that next available stitch into the back panel and only into that back loop. Then yarn over and pull through everything, and that's it. We're going to continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into, and when we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat everything we just did here on the other side. Alright, so we are back. We have just finished up both of our sleeves, and we are all done. Last thing we're going to have to do is just weave in all of our ends. And there you have it. Hope you'll enjoy the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch you on the next one. Bye!